Well, few airline executives have shown more patience with Boeing than Emirates President Sir Tim Clark. For nearly a decade, he's been the 777X's program's most vocal supporter, and perhaps their most patient customer, too. But even the famously diplomatic Clark seems to be reaching his limit. And a perfect example of this happened recently when we, as here on the channel, reported that Boeing yet delayed the delivery of the 777X to customers until 2027 at the earliest. And while that sounds and looks like transparency by Boeing, the problem is that at the same time Boeing was telling the world, they neglected to tell the people actually paying the bills, that being airlines that have ordered the jet, and Emirates President Sir Tim Clark in particular. Because Boeing let Clark receive the news at the same time all of us did. And that was a real slap in the face to one of Boeing's most loyal customers. And Sir Tim Clark was not pleased about it. Not at all. So Sir Tim Clark, the Emirates chief, recently admitted that he was a little bit miffed after learning from the media, not Boeing, that the 777-9's first delivery would now slip yet again, this time to the year 2027. Yes, that's right. Boeing never picked up a phone to tell Tim Clark, president of Emirates, who placed the largest order for the jets and arguably have dumped the most amount of cash into the project. But what's worse is Clark had to find out from the media like the rest of the world. So this week at a gathering in Spain, Tim Clark made his feelings publicly known that he was really pissed. Well, Tim used the word miffed because he's a classy guy like that, but we all know he's pissed. But Clark has described himself as being a little miffed after learning about Boeing's latest timeline for the 777X program from the media rather than Boeing directly. And that's when Clark told reporters gathered on the sidelines of a conference in Seville, Spain. He said, I was recently with them in New York and before that in Seattle, and he said there was never a hint that they would make any official pronouncement that 2027 was to be the delivery year. He said the official contract delivery date for Emirates had been October 2025. This very month, he said. Clark had already adjusted his expectations to late 26 or 27, but to hear Boeing declare 2027 publicly without telling him first, well, that was a step too far. And that's when Clark just blew up in a rage, saying, I'm a little bit miffed. Clark said perhaps they should have told us first. Yeah, I know it's not really rage, but for Clark, that's about as angry as you'll ever see him. When Boeing launched the 777X program in 2013, Clark was one of its earliest and strongest believers. Emirates placed a massive order for 170 -9s and 35 -8s, making the Dubai carrier the program's cornerstone customer. At the time, Boeing promised the world's largest twin jet would be flying passengers by 2020. A next-generation replacement for the Emirates A380 fleet and a symbol of Boeing's engineering prowess. And we all know how that turned out. But as the years went on, the promises began to fade. By 2020, the first delivery date had already slipped as Boeing faced certification hurdles and the fallout from its 737 Frankenmax crisis. But Emirates watched patiently as timelines were revised, test flights delayed, and the program slowed by the pandemic and new FAA oversight. But Clark, ever the statesman, publicly urged patience and confidence. However, inside Emirates, the repeated changes forced the airline to adjust their long-term fleet plans again and again. Then in early 2024, after years of uncertainty, Emirates decided to refreeze its interior design for the 777-9, completely reworking the original layout that had become outdated after so many years of waiting. Clark's team and its suppliers, from seat manufacturers to galley designers, worked furiously to deliver the first header version of Emirates' unique 777-9 configuration. As Clark described it at the time, we have a very bespoke interior. It was a signal that Emirates was finally preparing to receive the aircraft, perhaps by latest 2026. However, also at the time, Boeing had privately suggested certification might wrap by mid-2025, with deliveries following shortly thereafter. So now in this latest disappointment and very public slap in the face to Clark and Emirates, well, it must feel like Groundhog Day all over again to Tim Clark. Yet even still, somehow, despite the delays and miscommunication, Clark remains committed to the 777X family. And he's already lobbying Boeing for something even bigger. A stretched 777-10, roughly 150 inches longer than the -9, adding 5 to 6 rows of economy seating. But of the bigger 777, Clark said that the -10 is at the moment fairly unique to us, he noted. but I'm quite sure when others see what we're doing, they'll probably want a bit of that. But as we all know, now over a decade after Emirates placed its very first order, not a single 777X has entered service. Clark's patience, one seemingly infinite, is being tested as never before. From the original 2020 delivery target to the 2027 projection, Tim Clark has watched the calendar slip year after year, quietly adjusting Emirates plans, reconfiguring interiors, and managing supplier schedules, all while waiting for Boeing to deliver on a promise made more than 10 years ago. And yet, even now, Clark continues to engage, push, and believe, the very definition of professional patience in aviation. But after so many delays, you gotta think even Tim Clark's goodwill has its limits. And in other news, Southwest Airlines has been making changes to its airline, some good, some not so good. However, all these changes are due to the fact that Southwest wants to become a mainstream airline and expand into other markets, and even some overseas markets. However, there are markets within the continental United States that Southwest wants to reach as well. But Southwest can no longer expand like they used to with an all 737 fleet. And since their growth prospects aren't great, their future profits aren't orders of magnitude larger than current profits, and so their stock won't trade at the multiples it used to. However, before the pandemic, they kicked the tires on Airbus A220s and looked at some Embraer E2 regional jets. The E2 has been put off for several years, though demand from Southwest could bring it back. But Southwest is now increasingly becoming a hub-and-spoke carrier, carrying more connecting passengers than ever. But the problem is at present, they don't have the right fleet mix to do this. But to do this, Southwest needs planes, and they need them now. But with delivery rates up to 10 years out, a new order is out of the question. But if Southwest were to buy an airline which already operates the planes they need, then that would be a win-win for Southwest. And an aviation analyst, Mike Boyd of Boyd Group International, has the perfect solution for Southwest, and that is Breeze Airways. He's suggesting that Southwest should buy Breeze Airways for its fleet of Airbus A220s. That way they wouldn't have to wait years for new planes. Boyd says the 737 Gambit was okay for the former Southwest, but it represents a capacity straitjacket in regard to the redirection the airline is pursuing. So the Boeing option is out because all they have on the shelf is more 737s. And as for Airbus, which makes the A220, well, it's being produced at something like 14 a month, and any order would be years to deliver. Embraer's 195 is possible, but it also would be years away. And time is not Southwest's greatest asset at the moment. So the logical conclusion for Southwest might be to purchase an existing operator, like maybe Breeze. They have 50 A220-300s on the ground, some literally due to the ongoing engine problems, plus another 45 on order. The 220-300 is a multi-role airliner that would allow Southwest enormous route flexibility. Southwest needs new, smaller planes to serve more domestic markets and fill the flights they already have. But they also need new, longer-range aircraft to expand to long-haul markets. They can fly to Iceland with the 737 MAX, but the Airbus A321XLR makes the most sense. But still, those have tried, but nobody's really made narrow-body long-haul work yet because you need high-yield passengers to do it, because seat costs are far higher than a wide-body. And Southwest is not a premium airline, so there's that. So fleet diversification with smaller planes makes sense. Hey, you're still here. Thanks for that. Hey, you know, there's probably boxes down here somewhere. YouTube seems to think you'll want to watch those, so maybe check those out. And also, if you enjoyed the video, please give us a like and share, and maybe consider subscribing. Until next time, as always, this is Maximus.